The FBI says a man threatened to kill Jewish officials in Michigan. State Attorney General Dana Nessel says she was among those targeted. According to the criminal complaint, the suspect posted online support for the so-called sovereign citizens movement. That's a self-declared independent nation that members claim makes them immune from U.S. laws. Let's bring in now Kyle Spencer, author of Raising Them Right, the untold story of America's ultra-conservative youth movement and its plot for power. And we're also back with John Miller, S.E. Cupp, Dan Harris, and Joey Jackson. John, I want to just start with this suspect's philosophy as he spells out via tweet. This is his philosophy on sovereignty. So on February 18th, he says, courts do not have subject matter jurisdiction over the issue of sovereignty, nor do they have personal jurisdiction over me. My status cannot be legally challenged. Any crime that has been claimed I committed, I am, number one, immune from prosecution anyway. And number two, all the evidence is fake.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Case closed.
So the sovereign citizen movement, which kind of grows out of the militia movement, so you have the Michigan militia, and then you have all the sovereign groups, and the idea is I'm declaring, that I am not a part of the United States. The government has no authority over me. In this case, Jack Carpenter, our suspect here, who's charged in this case, declared a 9-mile radius around his house as the nation of New Israel, and that was his sovereign nation. And, they sue everybody in court. They drive around. They don't recognize the DMV. Don't you wish you could do that? So they don't have plates on their cars. The police pull them over. But it's no gain. I mean, we've had sovereign citizen members, kill police officers in car stops. It's a growing, disturbing movement.
Well, there you have it. Because, Kyle, I'd say this guy sounds crazy, but he's not alone. So obviously he's part of something that may be growing, that lots of people have known about. And so why is Michigan a hotbed of this?
It's interesting because we've seen a lot of these groups in Michigan. And I think that we see these groups in Michigan right now, these growing groups that are really kind of ignored. I think a lot of people don't realize they're out there. But we have in Michigan like these two movements. We have these militia groups that are there, and then we have these very, very powerful women in office. We have an incredibly powerful female governor, Whitmer. We have a female attorney general. We have a female secretary of state. And I don't think it's an accident that there's this growing militia movement in Michigan. I mean, remember that Michigan is the state where a few years ago, another militia movement decided that they wanted to kidnap and, hold the governor ransom. So I think we're seeing like this sort of rise of these powerful women in Michigan and then this counterattack.
That's an interesting juxtaposition. Dan, when you were reporting for ABC, you say that you knew about this group and did reporting on them.
Well, but just as John was saying before, and you echoed this, it sounds insane that you can just unilaterally declare that the laws don't apply to you, you don't need license plates. I covered a lot of these sovereign citizens occupying empty homes and refusing to leave. It sounds insane, and yet this is a growing movement propelled by the internet where people are, as John said, ending up in lethal confrontations and in court and making threats. It's a real problem.
He's also, Essie, not only anti-government, he's also anti-vax. Here's another tweet. This is from February 16th. This was a tweet responding to President Biden. You hired people to violate international law and kill me because I can prove you committed a felony, as well as everyone who said safe and effective about COVID-19 experimental injections. Your thoughts?
Well, look, I think this can also be part mental illness. I mean, there is a contingent of folks who are drawn to and radicalized and drawn to these fringe movements because they're infected with some kind of hate, maybe have some mental illness. That's not a must for this. It's not a requisite. But there's some delusion to this, obviously. We saw this kind of delusion with the Paul Pelosi attacker as well, and his tweets and his view of the world. But that's why rhetoric is so important. And so when people get up and talk about conspiracy theories around vaccines or make anti-Semitic comments, whether you're a podcaster or a member of Congress on the right and the left, it has some really deleterious effects because in essence, it gives permission to people. Say, well, I'm not crazy, and I'm not the only one. Someone else out there with a big microphone is saying what I think. And so I'm going to go ahead and double down on what I believe and maybe even do something awful about it.
Yeah, lonely minds are fertile territory for
Yeah.
conspiracy theories, and then the problem is it makes you feel less lonely. It makes you feel connected to something larger.
Right.
It gives you somebody to hate and rally
You're a victim.
against.
Yep.
It's a toxic combination.
Right, because you're bonding over the.
It is.
And Allison, it wasn't in the comments he made, but when he was stopped, he had firearms with him and ammunition, and that's problematic. I mean, you could say whatever you want to a point, right? But then when you have these threats and you have things that are on you where you can carry out those threats, it makes it a real problem.
Especially since he had an order of protection against him. So,
And so,
that
Kyle,
makes that
Yeah.
worse.
So tell us your thoughts on the intersection of the anti-Semitism, the anti-vax, the
Yeah.
anti-government. Yeah.
I think, the thing about this movement in particular is that it has in the past conducted itself with this kind of paper terrorism, which is that they would, go to judges and give them lots of paperwork to police officers. It was kind of this weird thing that they did. But I think it's notable that this group is getting more violent. And I think that speaks to the kind of violence that we're seeing increasingly in our country and the calls to violence that we're seeing online, the school violence, that this group is moving away from this kind of paper terrorism into actual, threatening, and then of course driving around with these guns with this intention of harming a public official. But the conspiracy theory is another thing too, because this group has historically had this kind of pseudo historical idea about how this country works, and they actually believe that the founding father, that the current government took over from the founding fathers at some point in history. And of course, we have right now this period in which conspiracy theories are all over the place and really sticky. And I think that's another reason why we shouldn't be so surprised that this group is reappearing.
And one last question, Kyle. It's trying to attract younger people, and is that working?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I saw a lot in my book was this effort to really normalize violence and violent rhetoric and really hostile rhetoric. And you see that on college campuses. You see it with these groups that want to push for military grade weapons to be legalized on college campuses. And you see that online. Candace Owens, who is a very, very popular social media right winger, was online, I think it was today, calling on telling everybody that she wanted to punch Zelensky in the face. This is somebody who sees herself as a role model for young conservatives. And that's very, very common for her and for a lot of her right-wing friends. So yes, I think kind of normalizing violence among young people is something that the right-wingers particularly want to push.
Kyle, thank you very much for all of your expertise. Really important context for all of us. Stick around, everybody, if you would, because after all of the questions surrounding George Santos's finances, he finally has a new campaign treasurer, thank goodness. But some people have just one question. Does that person really exist? Stay with us.